You don't need anyone, and somehow that makes people uncomfortable, not impressed, not inspired. Uncomfortable. You stopped chasing. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped oversharing just to feel connected. You became quiet, centered, self-contained, and that's when things shifted. The energy changed. People who once leaned toward you started leaning away. Invitations slowed down. Replies became shorter. Conversations felt different. And you're standing there thinking, why does being okay threaten people? You didn't become arrogant. You didn't become cruel. You didn't isolate yourself. You simply stopped needing constant reassurance. And that was enough to make you an outsider. Let's talk about why. There's a social contract nobody talks about. It's not written, but everyone feels it. I need you, but you need me too. That's the equilibrium most relationships are built on. Mutual dependence, mutual validation, mutual emotional leverage. Because when both people need something from each other, no one has power. But when one person becomes internally stable, the balance collapses. The moment you stop needing approval, you remove your vulnerability to control, and that's destabilizing. For thousands of years, survival depended on belonging. Rejection meant danger. Exile meant death. So the human nervous system still reacts to autonomy as if it's rebellion. And rebellion inside a social system always triggers correction. You're not being rejected randomly. You're being corrected. The system is trying to restore equilibrium. Here's the part nobody tells you. Your independence doesn't just change you. It changes what other people get from you. You used to be the listener, the fixer, the emotional regulator, the person who absorbed tension. And when you needed connection, you tolerated imbalance. You overgave. You over-validated. You over-explained. But now, you don't panic when someone pulls back. You don't over-apologize. You don't chase reassurance. And someone who built their identity around being needed by you suddenly feels useless. They don't hate you. They hate the loss of their function. When you stop starving, the person who fed you loses purpose. Watch how small the changes are. You don't text first. Now you're distant. You don't escalate emotional drama. Now you don't care. You say no without a paragraph of justification. Now you're selfish. You stay calm during conflict. Now you're cold. Notice something. None of these are harmful behaviors. They're regulated behaviors. But regulated people are harder to manipulate, and manipulation thrives on emotional reactivity. So your calm becomes a threat, not because it hurts anyone, but because it can't be controlled. When people can't control you emotionally, they control the story about you. You're not independent. You're arrogant. You're not self-contained. You're detached. You're not selective. You think you're better than everyone. This is how social systems defend themselves. They reframe autonomy as pathology, because if independence is healthy, then dependency becomes optional, and that realization destabilizes group identity. At work, you don't gossip. Now you're not bonding. In friendships, you don't over-disclose. Now you're closed off. In dating, you don't double text. Now you're low effort. They don't dislike you. They dislike the loss of leverage. Let's go deeper. You were trained for approval. School rewarded compliance. Family rewarded helpfulness. Relationships rewarded emotional availability. You learned that being agreeable equals being loved. Being useful equals being valued. Being needed equals being secure. So when you stop performing those roles, it feels wrong, even to you. That guilt, that discomfort, that urge to explain yourself, that's old conditioning. Because for years your worth was tied to how necessary you were. Now you're valuable without being needed. And that disrupts every dynamic built around your usefulness. To someone with unresolved attachment patterns, calm independence feels like abandonment. They're used to volatility, push-pull dynamics, emotional spikes, reassurance loops. So when you stay steady, their nervous system interprets that as distance. They test you. They create tension. They provoke reactions. because reaction equals care in their framework. And when you don't react, they conclude you don't care, not because you're cold, but because they've never seen stable love modeled. Calm is foreign. Foreign feels unsafe. Unsafe feels like rejection. Modern dating thrives on anxiety loops, delayed replies, strategic unavailability, intermittent validation, dopamine spikes. But if you're emotionally independent, you don't participate in the loop. You don't chase. You don't test. You don't manufacture urgency. And for someone addicted to emotional volatility, that feels boring, predictable, low chemistry. But what they're actually feeling is a lack of chaos. And chaos has been confused with passion for years. Your steadiness filters out instability, and instability doesn't like being filtered. Work environments reward visibility, not always excellence. Visibility, struggle, performance, political alignment, emotional signaling. The employee who constantly seeks feedback looks engaged. The one who quietly produces elite results looks distant. Why? Because insecurity is easier to manage than confidence. If you need validation from your boss, you're controllable. If you could walk away, you're unpredictable, and systems prefer predictable people, not powerful ones. At some point you realize something uncomfortable. Belonging was conditional. It was negotiated through usefulness, through emotional access, through predictability. And once you see that you can't unsee it, you stop asking, how do I fit in? And start asking, what does this cost me? That's the shift, from seeking approval to evaluating environments, from chasing belonging to selecting alignment, from reacting to observing. And once that shift happens, you won't be able to go back. Independence creates social distance, not because you isolate yourself, but because you're no longer emotionally synchronized with dependency-based systems. You don't laugh at insecurity-driven jokes. You don't join gossip. You don't perform outrage. You don't overshare for bonding. And that makes you different, not superior. Different. And different inside conformity-based systems always gets labeled as threat. Outsider isn't a punishment. It's a transition phase. You're between systems, no longer aligned with the old one, not yet surrounded by the new one. That space feels lonely, but it's not regression, it's recalibration. Here's the irony. The less you need people, the more grounded you become. The more grounded you become, the more stable your presence feels, and stable presence is rare. Scarcity increases value. Not playing the game removes you from the hierarchy, and when you're outside the hierarchy, you can't be ranked. That's when something shifts. You stop being evaluated and start being observed, because emotional self-sufficiency is magnetic, not loud, not flashy, magnetic. There's one danger here, the loneliness phase. When the old relationships fade and the aligned ones haven't appeared yet, this is where most people relapse. They go back, they over-text, they over-explain, they shrink again, because silence feels unbearable. But if you regress now after seeing the pattern, you don't return to ignorance, you return to self-betrayal, and that's harder to recover from. Stay steady, not rigid, steady. You were never rejected for being cold. You were rejected for being stable. You were never pushed out for being arrogant. You were pushed out for being self-sufficient, and self-sufficient people don't reinforce insecure systems. So if you feel like an outsider, ask yourself, did I become unlikable or did I become unmanageable? There's a difference. One means you need to improve. The other means you've evolved. And evolution is rarely welcomed by those who chose comfort. Stay sovereign. Stay observant. And if you're in that transition phase right now, understand something. You're not losing people. You're outgrowing contracts. And once you fully internalize that, you won't feel like an outsider anymore. You'll feel like someone who finally stepped outside the herd. And that's not isolation. That's autonomy.